you need to convalidate, or how does it work exam-wise?
I mean, if it's a French school, it's the same French system. So, you have the same grades. Like you're graded on the same things and same level. It's a French academy.
So you accumulated the notes or the badges from South Africa to Japan at the end, no? Like
yes.
You've been in a French
yeah, I've been in a French system for most of.
In 3 different countries. That's also very. It's nice.
I've seen different ways of teaching. They have the same structure, obviously, in the same courses, but there's a little bit of localization for some options. Music in South Africa was way more fun. I think I've never met another music teacher that was as good as fun. He'd teach us djembe, or he'd make us build our own flute, and we'd work on South African rhythms and songs and national anthems and things like that. And national anthem is not in English, in South Africa. It's I can't remember the language actually of it, but they have 11 national languages.
Okay. Language-wise, did you learn any of the languages of
South Africa was English. I didn't learn Afrikaans, but they didn't really teach it in school either. In Japan, I wanted to take Japanese third language, but that program started 2 years before my arrival. Like you'd start 2 levels before, so I couldn't take it because I wouldn't have the level, and I think I had other things to catch up on that were more prioritized.
Yeah, I mean, if it's only 8 months, exactly. I don't know if you learn much.
And you have your final exam, which is the big thing.
Can imagine. So. You need to focus a little bit on 2 priorities, I suppose.
So no extra languages than English.
What about the culture itself? Like, did you immerse? I mean, of course you were in school with French people, but would you say that you really lived the Japanese culture at some point?
I definitely enjoyed the city. I wouldn't say I really immersed myself because being in a French family at home and a French school, I wasn't exposed that much. Plus, I didn't speak the language, which is a big thing in Japan. I think I did get a little bit of some of the codes of, there's a lot of hierarchy is very valued, respect. There are a lot of small things in society that you have to know, like blowing your nose is considered unpolite. They'd rather you sniff it all up very loudly than you blow your nose, and some things like that.
Okay, well, that's a weird example. But yeah, I suppose this is the small things that you don't even consider when you move to a place, and then suddenly you are in a completely different way of doing things, no? Like, so
I think working in Japan is probably very, very different and much more structured. And I think my father had a bit more experience on that side, and saw it. But small things like he told me about going to a wedding in Japan where there's so many codes of the colors you can wear, not wear. Even when you give a gift, you usually give a gift you give cash. It has to be in an envelope. You choose the color of the envelope. The banknotes have to be new.
Whoa.
You're not going to pull out a random banknote that's been folded 5 times. There's an order. Well, not really an order, but you have to put them in a certain way, facing this way inside the envelope, fold the envelope this way, hand it over in a certain way so that you're not going against a certain traditional.
Nice. I mean, it's one of the cultures with more traditions, ancient traditions and preservation, and they really live out of it. Like, everyone has traditions, but it's true that the Japanese culture is known to have a lot of codes. So you finished then the studies there, you did your exams to enter university, and then you went back to study in France, you said?
Exactly. I moved back to France on my own. My mom helped me for the move, and my parents stayed in Japan another 2 to 3 years,
Okay.
I think. So yeah, when I left house, I left far.
For real.
Yeah, I was 18, and yes, I moved to France, to Paris. So
Okay.
first time living in Paris, living alone, to start prep school. Prep school in France is 2 years of intense. It's like an intense high school on a couple of subjects, and it allows you to prepare for exams, where there's only a number of spots available to get into the schools, like business schools or engineering school. So I followed the path for business school. So it was an exciting time, definitely, when you're 18 to 20 in Paris, living the life. But it was an intense 2 years, and I think it was harder than I thought, looking back after, just because, yes, it was one very, very intense in terms of school. I mean, it's known to be harsh and breaks a lot of people. And having that distance with my parents, I think I hadn't quite realized how difficult of suddenly you go from living with them to you see them once a year, which is very different. And there's such a time zone difference that we had to plan our calls. Like, you're not calling at any time of the day. Plus, it was still Skype with credits. I didn't have WhatsApp yet.
Yeah, the lovely Skype. I
Yeah.
forgot about Skype.
Yeah. Works like a charm.
Yes, definitely. Best video quality ever.
So, I was planning that weekly call at a specific time, evening for them, morning for me, and trying to catch up and pack up your whole week in this small call. I think emotionally was quite hard and intense, because I didn't have family in Paris. I did have family still in Angoulême, so I would go once in a while, but I wouldn't go that often either. Because train tickets in France are not that cheap. And it was also logistics, and I had to study a lot on weekends also. And so I'd study, I'd go out a little bit, also take the pressure off. But luckily I had a lot of friends from both Angoulême, the city in France where I had lived, but also from Tokyo. A lot of the students in Tokyo with me also moved to Paris to study after. So there was that friendship support system between, you're a student, so you meet a lot of people in your school, in your university you hang out with, and I had also the people from high school, the previous high schools I used to hang out with.
Nice. It's also cool that you have someone who's passing through the same thing as you, no? Because if
Yes.
the people who were coming from Japan, probably their parents also stayed in Japan, they were a little bit of being in the same situation always unite people, no? A little bit more. When does then Ireland come on this? You study the whole you do business school, you do university, and then when do you move to Ireland?
Yeah, so I moved much later on. So I moved to Poitiers for my studies. I did my business school, a little bit of Erasmus, internship abroad, and then I just moved back to Paris for my final internship. I started working there a couple of years. I was in sales, and I was trying to change jobs, but I was looking in Paris. I was just fed up. I needed a change, and nothing was picking up. All the HRs were calling me to do exactly the same thing that I was doing, and no, I wanted to move more into the tech space, into marketing. And I met this girl who was living in Dublin and working at IBM. So I just picked up and saying, "Oh, IBM has jobs. I hadn't thought of that company. I'll take a look." And one of the jobs was, I looked at the Paris section, and one of the jobs, when I opened, said, "Well, this is actually based in Dublin." I was like, you know what? I'll apply, see what happens. And it's the only one that went through. So suddenly I'm going to move back 20 years later. And I had Parisian friends who had actually moved maybe a year or two previously in Dublin to work in tech, because it's the biggest
Yes, of
bubble
course.
in Europe.
Nice.
So
suddenly you are going back. This is really weird. Like going back home from home. Like it's this whole situation of like you repatriated from Japan to France to repatriate yourself to what you also consider
starting
home
the
at
loop
some
all over
point. Like,
again.
are you planning to go to South Africa anytime soon? Like just like circling back again and again.
So it was pretty unplanned. And I think what got me to apply was saying, well, you know what, I know Dublin, it's not far, and I have friends there, so why not? But so you say it's like going back home. I never in my mind thought it's home. For me, I had settled in Paris. I had bought my flat. I had a little bit of an itch of, so I want to go back abroad and, go alone, not through university, not through my parents, but also prove to myself, I can do it. I can do it on myself, on my own. So it came up a little bit out of the blue, and I caught the opportunity, but I left saying it's going to be 2 years. I didn't see myself settling. I think I also left. I was in a relationship and we did long distance for a little while until it just fizzled out because I had no exact return date. But yeah, it was more of...
If you liked this short video out of the full episode, you can find the link to it around here and in the description below. Of course, if you are also interested in checking out other episodes, please subscribe and like.